All right, guys, Tom Hunt here in the kit room. First of all, Merry Christmas. Less than 2 weeks to go now. Really looking forward to it. Bit of family time. Not so much fishing for me at the moment, as I had an operation on my foot. So little bit of fishing, but not loads. But today's subject is going to be around big pike bait. So I think this was sent in by Lee Barker. Hope I've got that right. And the question was, when, where, how do I use big baits for pike in the UK? So I'll give you a little bit of context about I fish abroad quite a bit as well. But yeah, so first of all, let's run through, well, what makes a big pike bait? So let me give you a bit of context. So in the UK, we've got a lot of anglers and not so much water, at least not compared to somewhere like Norway or Finland, where you've got way less population and way bigger areas, loads more lakes. They're proper wild. And when you get places like that in the UK, the fish get fished for, the angling pressure can be quite high. My biggest tip is always kind of downsizing. So for me, a competition lure will be a 12 centimetre shad tease, regular one. A normal pike fishing lure for me would be something more like, what we've got here, we've got 14 centimetre Ricky the Roach. He's a nice pike bait. 16 centimetre shad tease. Again, great pike bait. So I'd kind of class these as medium-sized baits. 12 centimetres is starting to get on the small side when I'm scratching for a bite or it's a competition. But really, once we're up to like 18 centimetre bull tease, that's sort of getting there, a little bit bigger. And then we're up to like 22 centimetre shad tease slim, 24 centimetre bull tease. I've got in a couple of different colours here. They're obviously starting to get pretty big. And things like the 15 centimetre swim, you can see he's been smashed up, and that's 4 ounces, 115 grams. So you need a proper rod to throw it on. And I've even got one there that I've made up with a curly tail on, with one of these little pro tail spinner bait addition things. Changed where the hook, so the hook hangs off this bottom one. This has got a screw, so screw it into that one, and that goes on a 15 centimetre swim. Have a look. I've married up that orange underbelly, and the yellow sort of matches the goldy yellow of that. So I really like that bait as well. I'm going to be giving that a go. So that's what we're talking about. Platypus, big platypus as well. That's nearly 100 grams. So that's what I'm talking about with big baits. Pretty much anything kind of 20 centimetres or over. Okay, so I think there's 3 or 4 categories. When would I use it? So what type of scenarios? How do I use it? And let's talk about retrieves maybe. So when do I use it? Rivers. Anytime you've got rivers, those fish are expending energy constantly to just stay still where they are because they're in the flow. Every time that happens, that makes the hunger of that pike, the wildness of that pike, he becomes much more opportunistic, because if that thing is floating down past him, if he sees something coming over, he hasn't got very long to make a decision. And he's always going to be a little bit on the hungry side because he's fighting and using energy. So I just find that if you can get something to go past them, those pike are much more angry, much more aggressive in rivers. So that is certainly one scenario where I think using a slightly bigger bait is an advantage. Definitely unpressured waters. So like I started with, the difference between the UK and places that I've fished, so abroad, say in Finland, for example, they are using exclusively 22 as a small bait for them, 27 centimetre shad tease, 24 centimetre bull tease. Some of them I know are using plastics that are 30, 35 centimetres plus, you know, huge baits, and they're fishing for those big, much longer fish than we get. So a 10 kilo pike in the UK, especially from a trout water like the reservoirs that we've got, it's probably going to be around, so 22 pound, it's going to be around 1.5 meters. If you had 1.5 meters fish abroad, most of the time it's not getting, might be 15 pound, 16 pound. You know, there's probably an extra third onto the fish that we've got here in the UK in terms of weight to length ratio. But when you get abroad, they tend to have wider heads, I call them bream eaters. They are munching on bream. You know, often they're eating 1 to 2 pound fish. They've got huge mouths, wide heads, and then tend to be longer and skinnier. So to get a 10 kilo fish abroad, you're often looking at like maybe 115, whereas over here it might be 102 to 105 might get you a 10 kilo fish. So quite a big difference. Anyway, yeah, so pressured versus unpressured fish. Those big pike, they are clever things, especially if they've been caught before. And when you've got a pressured water, you've got to think about how are they associating our angling techniques with how they've had a negative experience in the past. So a lot of the time it's if there's boats over the top of their head, they will get really cagey. If you're using big baits, they'll see them coming from a mile off and they'll avoid them, especially if you've got clear water. They just become really cagey and they start changing their feeding behaviour, and they often start feeding quite late at night when the boats and the anglers quite often aren't there. You know, so they're adjusting their behaviour to not get caught. So things like, think about leaving it as late as possible towards dusk. Things about small sizes, and I'm still talking for even for baits like this, a 12 centimetre shad tease, which most people think is more like, you know, a big perch bait. I'm still catching 20, 25 pound plus fish on baits this size. You know, so it's not scaling down for small fish, it's scaling down for big fish behaviour, and they've changed their behaviour because they can go around mopping up fish this size and they've rarely got hooks in them. All right, so that's the reason why they, you know, those big baits, they've seen them, they've felt them, they're aggressive, and they're just like not going to take a chance on it anymore. They'll just watch it come over the top of their heads. But like I said, rivers, unpressured water, I would use big baits. And definitely if I'm going abroad, yeah, any of those types of scenarios. Or the last one would be just if you've got those red letter days, when you've got the stars aligning in terms of weather condition, time of year, fish are on the feed. You know, you might find that a 12 or even a 16 centimetre bait, everything is hitting it. Tiny jacks are hitting them, and if you want to try and select those bigger fish, really upsizing, you know, to almost get it, you might still get quite a few hits from those small ones that are going to come up on it, can't quite get it in their mouth properly, but you might be trying to select, you might be getting less attention from those jacks, and when everything's in that feeding mood, you know, a bigger bait can really select those bigger fish. Another one that's just popped into my head, if you've got water clarity that's down a little bit and you really want to try and make more of a thump, more of a presence in the water, the visibility's gone down, a bigger bait can really, really kind of do that for you. So yeah, there you go. There's a few different scenarios. And there's one last thing. So let me grab one of these rods actually, and I'll show you. I've got... Right, so I've got the monster stick here. So I've got it on a 301 sized reel, and put it like this. I speak to Daniel Nielsen. He's based over in Norway. Sweden, Norway? God, I get confused amongst all of the Scandinavian countries. Anyway, he's abroad. And I spoke to him and I said, right, mate, put me onto what type of rods do I need for these big heavy baits a couple of years ago. And he just texted back, monster stick, 7'9" monster stick, throws up to 200 and, oh, I've got the wrong rod here. That's the power cast. Hang on. Sorry, here we go. So, same thing, 301 size reel. Got the Shimano Curado on this one. And I've got, yeah, here we go, monster stick, 7'9", so it throws up to 260 grams. And me, coming from a scaling down for big pike kind of mentality, I basically said to him, oh, are you sure? That seems a hell of a big, heavy rod. And he just, I said, can't I get away with like a 150 gram rod, 180 gram rod? No, the power shad comes in different sizes, that type of stuff. And he just texts back, monster stick, 7'9", 260 grams. So he wasn't willing to entertain. He was just like, no, he does all of that style of fishing all the time anyway. So I don't know why I questioned him in the first place, but there you go. This is the type of rod that I would use it on. So looking at either a 1.2 mil fluorocarbon or a heavy wire, like a 50 to 80 pound wire. I've got 0.32 braid on here, so I think we're looking at about 60 odd, 65 pound I think it might be, and big heavy rods. And you need it. You need to upstep everything in your kit if you're going to fish these big baits with big trebles. And one last tip that I want to give you guys about fishing big baits or when to fish big baits. Sometimes you go to a venue and you start fishing and not much is happening. And you think, oh, this is unusual. Normally get a few bites, a few pulls, there's a few pike around. Especially if it's a venue that you know has got ahead of, say, sort of 3 to 8 pound fishing, you know, what I'd class as kind of jacks, and you're not catching anything. You can't get a bite on anything. Remember this, guys. Sometimes those days you can't get a bite and you're expecting a bite off some smaller ones. Do think about downsizing, and if you still can't get a bite, go the other way. Go big. And the reason is sometimes those small pike won't feed because the big ones are active. All of the fish in that area kind of get an understanding. I learnt this when zander fishing at places like Rutland, where we're fishing for zander, and they're not the biggest zander in the world, between sort of 2 and 6 pound most of the time. And I'd be in an area where I know that there's zander and I'm really struggling for a bite. I then, on my zander kit, hook a pike, and it might be 20 pounds, say, and I basically get it out of the swim, get it out of that area. And that might happen. It might take you 2 or 3 pike might be in that area that you've got to try and hook them and get them out. And when they go and skulk off, suddenly the zander just switch on because they now know that those big predators aren't in that area or aren't active anymore. So they're all kind of judging, you know, what's going on. And the days that you can't catch either perch or when you're expecting to, or jack pike when you're expecting to, that could be a day that it might be worth, you're only looking for 1 or 2 bites, put a big lure on, and it might just be because there's active, huge pike. And a big active pike, a 20 pound plus pike, will eat a 3, 4, 5 pound pike, no problem. They will hit them. And so if those small ones are active, they're really, really vulnerable if you know that those bigger fish are feeding. All right, so pay attention to kind of what you're getting bites from as well. It's not just to kind of wade through, catch as many pike as you can. Keep an eye on the conditions and kind of think about your angling. And I think you might. That's the type of tip, you know, that I really hope you guys take on board, and to make you turn into what I call a thinking angler. So there you go, guys. When, where, how and why I would fish big baits for pike. And yeah, if you've got any more questions, stick them in the comments below. I stick them on a little list. I've got a backlog of about 4 or 5 to make at the moment. I know there's Enrico in Italy. Got one to make on, I think it's lure colour with him. There's another chap called Dale, which I think was a summertime weedy river question. So I'll probably do that later in the spring or the summer when it's relevant again. But yeah, like I said, if I can help with anything, more than happy to. So yeah, Tom Hunt in the kit room. I'll see you on the next one.